Welcome to the podcast on music, art, and culture. I'm your host, Matthé de Bruin. Music and art grasp me, and in this podcast series, I try to find out why. This episode, my guest is Scott Pearson. Welcome to the podcast. We met on while I was in university at the HKU. That's the University of the Arts in Utrecht.
Right.
And you were a master's student, and I were a bachelor student at the time.
Indeed.
And we took some courses together, and they were always interesting. So, could you tell me how you ended up in that classroom?
Well, I was pretty unhappy with the politics in America, and I also was unhappy with my job situation because I had worked for Discovery for almost 20 years, a little over 20 years. And then one day I got a letter in the mail saying, well, Discovery has sold their music division, and you're out of a job. And because Discovery was my only client, I didn't take a lot of time and effort, energy to build up a big list of clients that I could go to. So I didn't work very much for a few years. When I did work, it was on great sort of high-end projects, but it was very different working once or twice a year for a few weeks, when you score stuff, than working all the time. And when I was with Discovery, I was working all the time. I have about 2,000 copyrights. If you look on IMDb, there's over 200 shows. They're not great shows.
There are a lot.
There are a lot of really bad shows. That's the sad thing, is if you look up the actual ranking, there are 5 or 6 or 7. You know, but they played all the time, so I got enough royalties where I thought, if I get the opportunity to do something else, I will. And then when Trump got elected, I was just like, I cannot handle this. And I wanted to get a master's degree anyways. So I looked up opportunities overseas, and HKU was the easiest, and I got the Holland scholarship, so that I didn't have to pay full price. And I liked the people, and even though my dad's British, they had Brexited me, so I wasn't going to go back to the UK.
No, yeah, true.
So I thought I would take a chance, and the interesting thing is that I think I actually like it better than even the UK. Because once you get past the language, which is not that big of a problem, but it's belangrijk to leren the Netherlands. But once you get past that, I find that Dutch people are amazing. The musicians are just as good as any American composers, but just underserved. It's a small country,
Yes.
so
That's definitely a problem within the arts sector. It's so small.
yeah, it's underserved because the quality of the stuff here some of it's amazing. It blows the hell out of some stuff I've seen in the States.
What I noticed about small scenes is that it has the potential to both serve talent and also serve crap really well. Like if in a small scene, we have a Dutch saying, I don't know if it exists in English,
Right.
and in het land der blinden is één nog koning. So in the land of the blind, a cyclops,
Cyclops, yeah.
Yeah, Cyclops of one eye is king.
Can be king, yeah.
Yeah, because he has one eye. So also part of the mainstream music in the Netherlands is extremely bad because the lack of good alternatives, I think.
Yeah, well, how would you make money? Radio royalties for this smaller population are not going to be a major factor.
No.
What is a factor here, and what I found out during my research, is that the Netherlands is unusual. They're one of the most, they go see live events more than most peoples on the earth.
Really?
Yeah, more of your disposable income is geared towards seeing live events than any other group of people, any other nation on the earth.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I didn't either, actually, and I found out about it quite accidentally when I was doing research about something else. But the live sector here is really important. And if you think about it, there really is something going on every night. Even in small towns, to some extent, I say small, I mean like Amersfoort versus Utrecht.
Yeah.
But even in mid-sized towns, there's usually a theater in the middle of town, like a live action theater.
Yeah.
And they usually have bands and festivals and stuff every weekend. It's a very much a live music scene here, because there's just not the capability to do much with royalties and filmmaking. I mean, there is some filmmaking, and if you can get the job scoring that as a Dutch composer, that's amazing. But even if you do, I work at a sound at a music company, and the Dutch composers, they make okay money, but even if it's a blockbuster hit in the Netherlands, you're not going to get rich from that.
No, definitely not. You have to
Right.
move to either Hollywood or Bollywood to get
Right.
rich.
So Tom Hulkenberg and
Yeah.
people like that.
That's Junkie
yeah.
XL to us.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Martin Garrix and these are all L.A. guys. Of course, I guess they're really Dutch L.A. guys.
Yeah.
But they had to. I love that. See, that's the sound of tea, people.
Yeah.
I think they felt it inevitable to have to move to a larger format. That said, the internet is changing that, we hope, and maybe the day will come where if you're super talented, it really won't matter so much where you live.
There will always be a gatekeeper. That's one of the things that I think we were too optimistic about with the internet. We say it's the disappearing of gatekeepers. No, it's the temporarily bypassing of the traditional gatekeepers, and now there will be new gatekeepers because isn't just a new angle.
Maybe people are the gatekeepers.
Oh, that's a good one. People definitely are the gatekeepers.
Because now, without 50,000 views on your Instagram or your YouTube or whatever, or a certain number of plays on Spotify, you don't mean it doesn't mean anything unless you have some numbers behind you.
Yeah, I also think it forced the underground, so to speak, because everybody can have their niche.
Right.
So where there used to be for the underground, there used to need to be as a requirement a physical location to be underground, a
Right.
club or a hole in the ground or whatever.
Yeah.
But now it can be online, so it can be really even more underground.
Right, that's true, and underground is really it's relative because in my research again doing in music in Holland, there's a whole group of these sort of fat middle-aged guys that sing at fairs and
Yeah.
flea markets and stuff in the South in particular.
Yeah.
And these guys are selling records. These
Yeah.
guys are getting 50, 100,000 Spotify hits every year.
Really?
Yeah, these middle-aged women are buying their CDs at the concerts, at the markets and stuff. The radio stations are playing it, especially during Carnival. It's really odd, and that is just as underground as somebody who's making really glitchy kind of crazy EDM. Or
I think crazy EDM is not so underground anymore.
No, I
because
guess you're right. I mean,
the focus has shifted to electronic music as the main form of music, and if you get a traditional jam band
Right.
together, people were like, "Oh, this is really alternative musicians' music." To us, it's musicians' music.
right, Fish and bands
Yeah,
like this.
The band.
The band, sure.
Bands like the band, and if you're doing that, making music with your friends, people are like, okay, but music is the finalized product that I hear on the radio that sounds super commercial and everything sounds the same because the standards are set, and if it's that, it's commercial and on the radio, and that's what people experience as music.
Right.
It's like the commercial production, and if you go play music to them, actually play it, literally, not play the record, but play the instruments, they will be like, oh, I can see how you really like this.
Right.
But it's not in their mind, conceptually it's not the same as listening to music, because to a lot of people I've met, listening to music is playing as a product on Spotify.
Right. But that's not the way I see it and I don't think that's the way that a fair number of Dutch people are seeing it.
No.
I'm going to throw this out at you.
Okay.
I would say that the Dutch live music scene is as good as it is because people like to be together with other like-minded people, especially the Dutch.
Yeah.
And when you're all enjoying the same thing at the same time, then you have a community. I know this because for the first time in my life, and maybe this makes me old, I didn't know what a silent disco was. And then I went to Amsterdam last weekend to Hush. And it's a silent disco there, and oh my God, it's just the most strangest idea because everybody is jamming out, but if you don't have the headphones on, it's like a library. It's just a very quiet, light, nice place that you can buy overpriced drinks, but in fact everybody is rocking out. So I think that community thing is what makes the live aspect
Yeah.
It's because Dutch people like to be together.
Do you think more so than other people?
Well,
I never realized it's a Dutch thing. I agree with everything, but I never realized it's Dutch.
well, of course it's not. I mean, people like live music all over the place, but just looking at the numbers, like the amount of money that Dutch people spend going out and participating in these, they're higher than anybody else in the world. It would imply that Dutch people are looking for something beyond the music in these experiences, you know? Plus, I like the fact that when I'm out hearing a band like Kensington or something that, you know, they have sort of these established records and everything that we all know every note of. They at least do get loose on the live stuff, and they're not robots. They can play it, you know, a variation of it, an acoustic version of it, an a cappella version of it, or an extended break in the middle or something like that.
They can play it.
They can play it, exactly. And that is not that common anymore, you know. 30 years ago, if you had a record out, you could play the instrument. Here, now, you know, you might be a technician. You might, you know.
I have this opinion, and I will throw this back at you.
Okay.
That professionalism killed music. And that's not, I don't mean a professionalism of showing up on time, although it helps.
Right.
But what I mean is standards like, a professional musician always brings a backup guitar that sounds the same like his first guitar.
Right.
A professional musician always has whatever prepared, and they're all valid IDs. They're not bad.
Sure.
But if you stack them all up, you get a sort of rules of what to do to ensure the same outcome every time you play, and that killed music.
It depends on what you're looking for from music, though, because you and I, we're musicians.
Yeah.
So we like theme and variation.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, a lot of your 14-year-old girls, they want to hear the song exactly the way that Justin Bieber played it on the record.
Yeah.
And if you screw with that, then there's a bit of disappointment there.
Yeah.
So I think there's a divide here, too. I would throw out that maybe there's more... it seems to me that a lot of Dutch people play an instrument. I don't know. I don't have any proof that it's more than other places, but it seems like maybe 1 out of 3 people plays some kind of instrument here. In America, it's probably more like 1 out of 10.
Really?
Yeah,
different.
musicians are kind of seen as exceptional. Oh, so you can actually do that?
Really?
Yeah,
it's quite common as a kid. There are a few requirements when you get your swimming lessons together.
Okay.
Usually after that, and that's your parents force you to play an instrument, and your parents force you to play a sport.
Right. Okay. I think I know a few Dutch families, and in my brain, I'm checking this, and you're actually correct.
It went like that for me.
Yeah.
And I didn't do sport as a kid, and my friends started doing judo on the schoolyard with me.
Okay.
And they were like, well, it'd be good if you learned the proper fight, so you're going to join judo as well. And so I had a sport. And it was like, yeah, I think we should get our children to take music lessons. So we went to it was me. I decided it, by the way. And when I was 8 years old, my dad took his guitar out and he sang songs like Blowing in the Wind.
Sure.
And Hello Silence, My Old Friend.
Right.
That's my dad.
Okay.
And he never did that. And
But he's Dutch, right?
He's Dutch, yeah.
Yeah, that's the unifying power of music is that
I grew up on American country and folk music, so I was aware of Johnny Cash as my father's favorite artist.
Wow.
And
Okay.
of course, there's the whole scene around that with
Right.
Willie Nelson.
That's classic country, my friend.
The classic Outlaws.
Right.
Outlaws.
Exactly. Not the '60s country, which is that twangy stuff, which is terrible.
It was so hard for me to listen to at first, but it's now a sound that's sort of a reference point in my brain.
Right.
Just like 80s music, I used to hate the sound of records produced in the 80s. It sounds shit.
Right.
And artificial and weird. But now I know it sounds so well that anything I hear something 80s, it's just like the reference light for 80s goes on.
Right.
Oh, yeah, sure, that's cool, that's 80s.
Right. It's intentionally sort of a throwback.
Yeah, but if I hear an original 80s record, I don't think it sounds crap anymore. It sounds 80s.
Right. It sounds like what it is. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't crap on great jazz records from the 40s. Sounds like 40s jazz, bebop, right?
Yeah,
I mean, and people still play that stuff. I mean, it sticks, luckily. So there's a couple of different directions we can kind of go with this.
Mm.
You were asking me before all this began about, so why would people do this for a living and that kind of stuff, and that's a whole discussion.
Yeah.
And then there's another discussion about how things have kind of changed. So I'm kind of curious to which way you want to
Well,
go.
you in your introduction, you mentioned you wanted to do a master's degree anyway, to get one anyway.
Right.
Why?
Oh, this is an easy question to answer.
Okay, good.
So I worked for the Discovery Channel for so many years. I was basically trapped in a studio for like 20 years.
Uh-huh.
And so I was not aware of changes in technology like I should have been.
Okay.
I wasn't.
So you wanted to get updated.
Yeah, I wanted to get updated. Not only like the best software and what people were using now, but also styles of music. I mean, I kind of came out of my hole, and all of a sudden it was glitch. This is back in 2012, 2013, and then going towards jungle punk and just different genres that I wasn't even aware of. And so I felt like if I was going to teach young people, about music and not just composing it, but the psychology of it and all the rest of it, I needed to go to where they were.
Yeah.
Because, when I was trained in music, there was no internet. So if you wanted a reference to music, it was usually classical music. And, it was a long process. Here, you can teach in one class with the internet. You can go, okay, now go to the YouTube that shows the tuba player. That's a tuba. This is what it sounds like. And all of a sudden there's a visual audio reference that's kind of hard to forget. Yeah. And you learn, okay, that timbre is a tuba timbre. Yeah. And you could teach, the difference between orchestral timbres in a couple of lessons versus an entire semester.
Yeah.
But without those references, I mean, we had records and stuff, but, you had to go to the class and you had to all listen to it together in quiet. And, it was a long, slow process. Learning music has gotten much faster because of the internet. But like anything, when you learn it quickly, you miss details.
That's so true.
You miss nuance. And that kind of, for me, defines sort of the people who are going to be musicians for a living to people who are great hobbyists or fine players, but not necessarily composers.
So why do people pursue it as a career?
Well, I have a music psychology class, and I talk about why is it that some people, and we all know these people, are just destined to be musicians. They can try to be something else. They can try to hold down other jobs and stuff, but it never seems to matter to them as much as music. And I take that because music is something that gives an immediate positive feedback. If you're 6 years old and you have a natural talent and you play a sequence of notes that is familiar to people, you get this very happy reaction from your parents, from your friends, and from your own brain. Your brain goes, oh, that was great. Look at all this positive response. I'm going to give you a little hit of dopamine. Yeah. I'm going to give you a little, a little chemical, reward. And then when you're playing something and you don't play it well, then your brain goes, ugh, and it gives you a little hit that says, hey, I don't feel good about that. I didn't do that well. I want to do that again. And you become sort of, for lack of a better term, really, really tough on yourself. And so what you end up with is a group of people who have an intense love for music, who get a little high off of music when they play it, who also beat themselves up all the time, because that's the way you learn to be a better player. You can't become a better player unless you, to some extent, have to be critical of your performance. But that doesn't stop when it's with the musical instruments. Those people continue to be tough on themselves about their academics and their love life and their family and their personal behavior and all that stuff, which kind of leads to a mental acuity, a change in their mentality that can alienate people. And then it sort of drives them more into music, because music never says no, unless you can't play it. Music is always there for you, whether it's passively listening or whether you're playing it. It's a friend that never will betray you, generally. And so, by the time musicians, people that I knew as musicians, got to their 20s, they were pretty much hooked. And when they weren't playing music, they were doing stupid shit like, taking drugs or being very adventurous sexually or doing thrill-seeking stuff, crazy stuff that you hear about musicians doing. You hear about musicians trashing hotel rooms or, getting into fights and stuff. And I have to say, I take some of that as being a search for the dopamine hit that they're not getting when they're not playing music. You know, that's kind of my take on it, because none of the professional musicians that I know ever kicked this stuff. I mean, I know people who are professional classical composers that are still smoking herb at 70, I guess Jeffrey's 78 years old, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that's what they used in the 60s to deal with not having the dopamine hit when the guitar was left at home.
Interesting.
But this is all somewhat conjecture. I mean, it's got some anecdotal evidence here and there to support it, but there's not been a lot of studies about this.
I do recognize some things about for myself, and I do miss some things. One of the things that I never had, and that's maybe the most crucial thing for me, is I wasn't a natural right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't get like, oh, you play a few notes, oh, it's familiar, it's nice, and give you the dopamine hit. It was more like a struggle to get to learn the instrument. I'm not an avid practicer as well.
So what kept you, you know, do you mind me turning the tables
sure,
on you?
Sure, yeah.
So what made you, since you weren't getting immediate satisfaction?
I've never really known, and that's part of why I'm doing this podcast series, but part of it is you got hit initially, like bitten by the bug, when I was 8 years old.
No doubt, music is cool. Nobody doesn't like music. Find me someone who literally doesn't like music. It's extremely rare.
Yeah, that's extremely rare indeed. And we're all very perplexed when somebody announces that they don't like music. We're like, really?
Yeah, maybe even a little bit of value judgment.
Yeah.
Could you trust somebody who doesn't like music?
No, of course you can't.
Or somebody who doesn't like kittens or cats, you know?
Yeah, because it sort of suggests that you don't have a fully functioning system for how do you say that, empathic.
You're not. Yeah, empathy.
Yeah,
sure.
So you kind of seem to lag there a little bit,
right?
Or understanding the world,
right?
Like, yeah, there's parts of the world I don't understand.
But don't always think that playing music is going to cause you to be more in love with your fellow man, because people use music like a whore as well. Teenagers, everybody knows a guy that can play guitar who learned when he was a teenager, because all he did when he was a teenager was be in his bedroom and practice over and over again, because that was a way to stay away from the world. When you're a teenager, especially a guy, I think, you're sort of assaulted by all your chemicals and, all these needs and wants that are not getting fulfilled. But again, you can touch your guitar, and you get the dopamine hit. Yeah. So it takes a little the edge off the rest of it.
For me in high school, that was certainly the case, because at some point I was the guitarist in high school.
Right.
It's a thing you can be.
Sure, it defines you. Yeah. It's brilliant. And again, who doesn't like that?
Yeah, well, no, it's very flattering for the ego. And I always suspected that I was wondering, am I into music because I love music, or am I into music because I love escaping from the world?
Well...
And is there a difference? That's now the question that I'm asking.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. You should... I heard that crazy sound.
Yeah.
What was that?
No, it's...
Oh, just something went by.
It's
okay.
Something outside.
That's a really good... I would be interested in asking my friends some of that. That was not a question that came up on my surveys, because I asked a bunch of people when I did this research about their personal experiences, and that's why I came up with the lecture that I did, because I found that it was the case. What I didn't have to deal with was the really negative consequences. I mean, none of my friends died because of an overdose.
No.
But God knows we've lost a lot of musicians at a very young age because of this.
A lot of my friends most of my friends are musicians, or my social network.
Sure.
Those were all musicians, and most of those people, they have sort of, you can see in their face that they drink a lot.
Yeah.
Because music is sort of the only job where you sort of expected to drink on the job.
Right. It's funny how the double standard is amazing. I talk about this a little bit in the lecture. I thought if you found out that your pilot had just had a joint before, driving the plane, you would be none too happy. Or the surgeon had just done a line of coke.
Yeah.
But either of those things with the musician you just paid $35 to see, and you're just fine with it.
Yeah.
Hey, where's mine? Where's my hit? Let's go backstage.
Or even the musicians weren't drinking.
Right. What
And
kind
they,
of
they
job?
seem to want to go to bed after the show. Now, that's such a bummer.
Right.
So
Right.
you much
There's an expectation like, hey, come on back here, let's do stuff. Which
yeah,
is
you are the party.
you are the exactly, and your crazy antics, regular people can sort of live vicariously through that. You
Yeah,
know,
you really enjoy it, and for one night, you just sort of join the train of madness that the artist is on.
right, exactly. But you know, if you know their art, I mean, I'm only going to use her because she's super famous now, Billie Eilish.
Yeah.
You know, you can hear in her songs. This is a gifted person that has a lot of struggles,
Yeah.
but she's just happens to perform it in such a way where we can all sort of identify with it. You know, I find that the further away from this personal music you get, the less of this that you get. So
Yeah.
weirdly, classical musicians, in my experience, are not quite like this because it's not it. I don't know what it is, but classical musicians seem to keep their lives together a bit more than, say, pop, dance, rock, soul. You know, even I would even say singer-songwriters and folk musicians.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why. Is there something about the composition process that causes this? Because you know, classical composers, they're not composing; they're playing an interpretation of
Yes,
something
that's
already done.
that's right.
What do you think?
I think they're definitely very, very different people.
Yeah.
Because you can put a bunch of pop musicians in a room and a bunch of classical musicians in a room.
Right.
And you don't have to ask them to raise hands to figure out which is which. So they're
true.
definitely different people, and that and also the way if you go to a classical conservatoire to check out how the school's organized and how the students are
Right.
versus an contemporary popular music environment, you will find out that it's organized very, very differently.
Yes.
And also, like you said, the playing of the music is very, very different because one group of people, the classical, interprets work, they recite work. That's dead, basically.
Right.
And the other ones are the ones entering the chaos to find new things.
Right. Right.
And maybe there's a hint of the difference why presumably classical people keep their act together.
Yeah.
They're not dealing with chaos that much. They're dealing with something that's already there. And
Right.
I would suspect that if you would take psychology personality tests, something like a Big Five test on musicians, that you would find that classical musicians are more conservative and less
Perhaps.
open.
Perhaps. It's funny because when we were going, you know, where you and I went to school is separated into sort of pop and rock musicians are in one school and then sort of classicals are in the other.
Yeah.
And there was always disappointment when you pulled those two groups together because you get the classical guy who would come into a session to do, say, some strings on a pop song. And they would be immediately disappointed that the sheet music hasn't been written out for them. And then, so they're a little unhappy. And then the producer of the pop song is a little unhappy because just play something. You know, just listen to it and play something like everybody else who does pop music does.
Yeah.
You know, but they don't understand that a viola player does not do a lot of improv.
No.
There's not a lot of, you know, theme and variation for the violist. So, you know, unless they're moonlighting doing like cafe music from the 30s, you know, with the little jazz thing, you can get a little bit of, you know, viola or even violin or fiddle, a little bit more accurate on those things. But, you know, so I think that there is something about this putting yourself out there, you know, when you're a creating musician, a composing musician, whenever you write something, particularly with lyrics, you're kind of putting yourself out there for judgment. This is why I don't write lyrics. I'll reveal to your podcast audience, I have less than 30 songs that have lyrics. And it's not because I can't write lyrics. I can write lyrics fine. I just don't want to. I don't want people to know what's in my head necessarily. I'm not brave enough to share that.
Interesting, yeah. Like singing is scary for most musicians.
Right.
And that's because an instrument is like you're playing a machine.
Yeah.
You pushing in buttons and something comes out, and that's cool, and you get complimented on your skills on pushing the buttons. And well, you can really feel good about yourself. But
Right.
if you start singing, you have to do something. It's you
Right.
doing something.
You
And
put yeah.
you are sounding beautiful. And if you play piano, you're pushing the right buttons to make the piano sound beautiful.
Right.
That's sort of the conceptual difference, I think, with singing, and I never realized, but apparently with lyrics as well.
Right. Yeah. Do you write lyrics?
I can't sing at all.
Okay. So
Well,
that,
I can sing, but I can only sing ugly. So I don't sing,
right.
and I don't like music with vocals in it, which is absolutely not true, because I listen to 90% of what I listen to is music with vocals. So,
But the music you make rarely has vocals.
never.
Never has vocals.
I've never made any. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I'm in a band, so the singer of the band makes vocals. But
Right. Right.
if it were up to me,
But
there would
there's a
be,
big difference, my friend. You know, your friend in the band going up to the mic and singing in front of those people, you're back there going, thank God it's not me. You know, because,
I use my guitar to sing.
right.
I use the guitar mainly as a solo instrument.
Right.
I don't play much rhythm guitar. I'm not so interested in that.
Interesting, because most people do the opposite. I can only play rhythm. I can't play shit for solo. I mean, seriously. I
Yeah.
mean, and barely rhythm at that. Really. I mean, just I can't make my fingers. I'm a pianist mostly.
Yeah.
I can't make my fingers change chords in time fast enough.
So, but that's a rhythm problem. If
Right.
you played lead, it would be no problem, because you could play really sparse phrases. And
Well, that's true. I could Dave Gilmore it, just like
Yeah.
4 notes for the. Yeah.
I love Dave Gilmour.
I do too.
And I really, really despise, and this goes back earlier to your introduction to why people get addicted to playing music. I really despise music that's technical for the sake of being technical.
Oh, really? Okay.
I-
Some people do, some people don't. It's not a big problem these days, honestly.
Being technical for no, people love it, and it's something that frustrates me as an artist, not as a musician, but as an artist. I feel music is a way. It is a way to say something that matters,
Right.
And if you fill that up with doing something that's difficult, like say you have some construction done in your kitchen, for example.
Okay.
Do you want the construction workers to build a beautiful kitchen, or do you want them to build a kitchen that was really hard to build?
Right. That's really, really good point.
And if you have both kitchens done, and you will go visit them both,
Right.
both your friends have a new kitchen, you go, oh, that's a lovely kitchen. I would really love to have that. Yeah, it was a really good builder. Okay, great. And if you go to the other guy's kitchen, you go like, okay, yeah,
Wow.
that's a kitchen. Yeah, but it was really hard to build. Like,
Impressive.
I don't care.
It's
Yeah,
impressive, but it's not functional, or it's impressive, but it's not
I don't want to
cosmetically
see it.
elegant.
I will respect that craftsman for building such a difficult kitchen, but
Right.
it's a non-issue, and to me that's the same goes for music, and it's a fault that happens during the early music training process, because most you get most things taught during teaching, and you get most things that are wrong taught during teaching. So one of the assumptions that I had as a kid when I started getting guitar lessons is the older kids have been taking guitar lessons for longer, and therefore they can play more complex stuff, and therefore they are better. And
Well,
that was true.
That's true. But my first music teacher told me, Scott, you're going to get through 3 phases. The first phase is you'll play, no matter what the instrument is, you'll play what you can play.
Yeah.
And then at some point, you'll get those down, and then you'll play as much as you can play. Way too much. You'll really get into finding just the most complicated stuff to challenge yourself if you're an addicted musician like you and I are. And then when you're mature, you play what is required, which is often not everything and more, but just some simple phrases here and there. So I can always tell when I have students, they're usually in one of those 3 phases. They're either not, they can just barely play and they're playing what they can, or they're coming in and they're doing these crazy Randy Rhoads, Al Di Meola solos, or just Rachmaninoff second piano concerto. Really, I mean, just like the most amazing possible, physically demanding stuff. But at the end of the day, people want stuff that will move them.
True.
And one of the failings, I say failings, one of the reasons that bebop maybe is not popular anymore, bebop,
I know. Yeah, that's super fast jazz from the
very
40s.
very difficult to play,
Yeah.
but doesn't mean anything. Because if I mean that was a little bit of bebop right there, you won't remember that melody at all because there's no repetition, there's no motifs. The whole idea behind bebop was
Yeah.
a feeling that this could do anything. This is a feeling of freedom, which is why I guess African Americans really clung to this because A, they were great musicians, but B, freedom was a fairly new thing for them and to be able to express themselves. But as far as great music with memorable melodies and stuff like that, not so much. You can't hum a lot of jazz.
No.
Classic music that we all know and love, comes from a nice balance between, exactly what needs to be there and not much more.
Yeah. What pops into mind is that the jazz standards that we all know and love these days are all only the ballads. Stella by Starlight.
Yeah, that's
Round
true.
Midnight,
Someone
Blue
to
and
watch
Green,
over me. Yeah.
Funny Valentine.
Right.
And if you early bebop, like the Charlie Parker bebop,
Yeah, Salt Peanuts. That's really not on the charts nowadays.
it's not on the charts
Right,
anymore,
yeah.
indeed. So yeah,
Exactly.
but I don't know. Round
Taking the
Midnight.
A is probably not going to be heard on the radio anytime
Nope.
soon.
No,
Yeah.
because it's all
Right, exactly.
And nobody cares anymore because when it was invented, it was like this stuff is radical.
Right.
And now it's like okay, cool. We had that period, and
Right.
only conservatory students are playing that sort of music anymore.
But the thing about it is the drug-addled Charlie Parker, was amazing. As far as a technician, he was amazing. And so
Also, I would say as a musician and as an innovator and as a innovator,
the whole
musical
group,
force.
the whole Dizzy Gillespie, John Coltrane, all these guys, and there's about 100 of them. Yeah, Art. We could go on. I mean, just the Theophilus Monk and these just classic guys. They all had addiction problems, and they were all playing at the top of their game. And so I think for them it was a way to define themselves against what they had been. I mean, now we go, oh, he's the first person in his family to go to college, and that's why we're proud. But back in the 30s, we're 50 years out of slavery.
Yeah.
If you include Jim Crow laws. 50 years is not long. It's within a generation.
Yeah.
So having, your father, brother, sister, whatever, be famous for being able to do this, be on the radio, be heard by millions of people, that's a peak experience. And that's music offered that to black people. Black people were not running companies, were not, they weren't even allowed in the army to some extent until World War II. But playing music really well, that could get you on the map. The biggest paycheck, I remember teaching this, there was a jazz vocalist named Bessie Smith, and she was the highest paid woman of her day. And she was a black woman in the 1930s.
Yeah.
And she was making more than, the people, the De Beers diamond fortune, that was run by a woman. She was making more than that. She was making more than the wealthy people, the ladies and the Rockefellers and all the, Sikorsky, Crystal people, all that. Bessie Smith was making serious money because she could do something nobody else could do.
Yeah, wow. So I would like to take this break to hop back
Okay.
to you sent me some material that I read
Right.
about and that was about the psychology stuff that we talked
Right.
about earlier, why people do music, and I told you that I recognize some bits of it and not others, which is really interesting to me because I always felt like an imposter as a musician.
I've
So
identified several of them while we've been talking.
Yeah.
This connoisseurship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's
what I wanted to get to. So you said you wrote the artist's mind takes stimuli differently.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk about that. And you had 5 examples, and I take all 5 for sure.
Sure.
Artists are impulsive,
Sure.
and that's
Name an artist that is not impulsive that's worth a shit. That's kind of my thing. Which I have to say, I was doing a live, as opposed to dead. I was doing a live lecture, and I had a Chinese student, and they made a really interesting point. The Chinese people, especially musicians, were pretty conservative even now.
Yeah.
And then she looked at me and she says, "Yeah, name a famous Chinese musician." And she stared at me. I was like, "Oh my gosh." I've been in the industry for 40, 50 years. I can't name a famous Chinese musician.
Hmm.
There aren't any because they don't put themselves out there.
It's interesting.
The culture does not allow them to put themselves out there quite yet. I think you're going to see a real renaissance in Chinese music soon. And if I were investing in the music industry, investing in China, because they just got a copyright law too, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, they have finally instituted a copyright law, which means you could actually maybe make some money at some point in China. But Chinese music is very traditional, very derisive, meaning it's sort of created from something else. There is certainly pop music in China, and it sounds like Western music that's been adapted. But there's not a lot of culturally significant musicians in China because it's not allowed.
Okay.
But anyway.
So why do you think artists take? No, this is the question is the other way around.
Okay.
So artists take stimuli differently.
Right.
So what does that mean for the artist?
You mean that they see the world differently? Well, I think that one of the things that you probably read about was alienation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Musicians who are really good, who are kind of obsessed with music, are generally alienated from a lot of people, just because they have a relationship with their instrument and their music that's rare, and it's kind of hard to share with, I guess, particularly family and stuff. I mean, you can be supported by your family, but there's a conflict because if you're out on the road and stuff, then your family wants you there for funerals and birthday parties and stuff like that, and then you've made this decision to prioritize music ahead of them. And there's an adaptation there. So there's an alienation thing. You can kind of you kind of pull away from your family because that you're hurting them a little bit, and then they kind of pull away from you, and then you end up with these sort of loneliness amongst musicians is reality. I've noticed this a lot. I don't exactly know if I could prove it, with chemicals or but measurements or something. But most musicians that I know, the better they are, the more lonely they are.
Interesting. I have a theory about the role of the artist in society.
Oh.
And for me, I always compare the artist to the person that is looking from the outside in through the window, and then reporting back on what he saw.
That's a really good. I really like that. I think you're dead on. I think that's exactly what a good artist should do.
But that's great because everybody loves to hear your opinion, and they find value in what you saw because they experienced what you saw.
Right.
So it matters to them, but it does mean that you're always outside.
Well, that's why most musicians kind of dressed a little crazy. Sometimes the hair is a little nuts, especially young artists.
Yeah.
And part of the reason they do that is they're kind of speaking for the people who love their music but are not in a position socially or psychologically to be that out there.
Yeah.
And I think I look for that from our musicians to say what needs to be said. Without having blowback, without going to jail, without having to suffer consequences. You can say stuff in a song that if you said as a public figure that they'd put you in jail. Absolutely. Back in the 40s, Lady Day, she had the song "Strange Fruit." If you know it. And it's about lynching in the South. Strange fruit on southern trees, hanging, drifting in the breeze. This is awful, strange fruit. It's awful to me. And this is lyrics, that if you had gone, and talked about this as a politician, about the lynching of black people in the South, you're setting yourself up for a real conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
But she totally got away from it. She got away with it because she's a musician. And we looked for that from our musicians. All of the 60s were propelled by the music of the 60s. Yeah. Times they are a-changin', Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that happened in the 80s were propelled by the 80s, Relax, don't do it. Just, if you look at the vibe of what the songs are saying, they're a direct reflection of the times. Even now. I mean, it's not stopping now.
Yeah.
Did you see the Dave performance at the Brit Awards? Dave is a rapper.
No, I didn't.
Amazing performance on the Brit Awards. I have to put in a little plug if you just.
Why was it good?
Because he really said a bunch of things that need to be said, including that Boris Yeltsin was a racist, which is true. And he
Okay.
said it, in front of tens of thousands of people and on national television because he could, because he's not running for office, because he doesn't have to worry about his next movie. He does it because that's what people expect him to do.
Mm.
He's an artist there to tell the truth.
And when was this?
This is only a couple of weeks ago at
Okay.
the 2020 Brit Awards, and the rapper is named Dave. He has a beautiful, it's like 5-minute piece that he performed, but it's amazing. And maybe there'll be a clip of it right now that you can find on the internet. You can play a little bit of
Yeah.
it. If you haven't seen it, it's
I will
outstanding.
definitely look it
He
up.
has this white piano, and he's showing movies of what he's talking about on the white piano as he's playing and rapping.
Mm.
So it's very stark and very interesting, and it's all about the role of black
So,
people.
what do you think about art? This is going to be a little detour.
Sure.
About art and propaganda. Is there a difference?
Well, yeah, there's definitely a difference. I mean, propaganda has that intent behind it.
Mm.
And you and I both know that not all art even has a particular intent behind it. There's not a thought through intent. Somebody says, "Oh, that looks cool. I'll make that," or something.
Yeah.
In Den Bosch, they have the Nazi art exhibit at the museum there,
Yeah.
and so it's in a design museum.
Mm.
And so they talk about the great design of this, and it's very artistic, but it's also Nazis. It's
Yeah.
also propaganda. So through that lens, it's all horrifying. If it wasn't in that lens, it'd be super cool and interesting. These kind of, eagles that are very, sort of austere and very
Yeah.
sort of intimidating, sort of icons and stuff that, they have lots of. It's really a lot of it's sort of neoclassical. They used a lot
Yeah.
of leaves and things, and large columns with Corinthian columns and Doric
Yeah.
columns, and in their architecture, the Nazis were definitely affected by the other conquerors, the Romans
Yeah.
but that's propaganda. That is art, and the reason it was made was from the beginning was for that purpose. Luckily, I think that not much art is made that's its sole purpose. I think now, since the 60s, we've been in this singer-songwriter thing where people are talking about their personal experiences.
Yeah.
And so trying to make bigger questions
Well,
answered.
For me, I'm always a bit. I bring it up because I'm always suspicious of political art. To me, political art is not art; it's politics.
That's true.
And but I'm making a statement on my own position here. It's not. It's not. I'm
Which is
not-
political, by the way.
Which is political, yes.
Yeah.
So I'm very political about my art being not political.
Right.
I want art to express, to venture in expressing the things that have not been expressed yet,
Oh, nice.
and therefore art critiquing society. That's like I get it from the person outside looking in kind of thing, but it's sort of it's your there's not enough space in between. It's too one-on-one. You can that's sort of what opinion makers do in a newspaper. They write an article saying how crazy something is that's happening in society, and just go, okay, this is an opinion.
Right.
But what I think artists are supposed to do is look at society and do something with that instead of just saying. So I'm kind of, before I see it, attacking the whole event show performance that you just suggested to me, because I haven't seen it yet, so I will.
Right.
But so it's I'm sort of guessing it's up in the air.
What did you say has total value? I mean, absolutely Dave's performance was a political statement. And if you went there just to enjoy music, the collections of tones together that's made to give you a feeling, then that interfered with that. And you admitted that you don't write a lot of music that has lyrics in it.
No music.
That completely, your attitude completely jives with who you are as a musician.
It does.
But somebody like Billie Eilish is the exact opposite. She really is all about her lyrics, and the music seems to be a distant second. If you listen to the actual
Yeah.
song, I mean, the actual musical content is completely subjugated by the lyrics.
Yes, but I think that's a critique I have of Billie Eilish, that her lyrics are
Too powerful?
too much expression of teenage angst, and
Oh, well, that's who she is, though.
well, that's fairly immature.
Right. I mean,
But
but there's a group for that. There's a group that needs to hear that,
sure,
though.
but take for example somebody that I consider a good lyricist, that doesn't necessarily falls into the trap of writing about their own frame of reference. For example, Tom Waits.
Okay.
And he is
Fantastic.
definitely an outsider looking in,
Yes.
and he writes about that
Yeah.
very sarcastically often. But it's not a sort of I'm the outsider looking in and I'll tell you everything that's wrong and this is my problem with the world.
Right.
And there's this artistic interpretation that makes it so much more valuable, so much more timeless.
But Tom is really honest, so I never get the feeling when I'm listening to a Tom Waits song that he wrote it for any other reason except to express himself.
Yeah.
I never feel like there's a political agenda behind it, even if it happens to have a political agenda.
Yeah, that's often he often takes strong stances on things, but it's
Right. But it's all personal.
it's
You know,
personal.
and he's
yeah.
and he's not saying you ought to feel this way. Or
So is that what you meant by from the 60s? You get a personal
Right.
experience in the songs,
Right, right.
and that's the light in which you see Billie Eilish her accounts of the world.
Right, right.
I see Billie
We
Eilish-
hope that grows with Billie, by the way, because that's who she is now. She truly is a 17-year-old girl.
Is she that young?
Yeah, so I would not
really?
expect anything more from her at this
Oh,
point.
really?
Now, if she were 25 and she were writing this, I'd be a little
I
disappointed.
thought she was in her 20s. to
Yeah,
be
if I
honest.
was...
if she's that young.
Yeah, she's literally 17 years old. She can't
wow.
drink. When she goes out, they have to watch that,
Oh, wow.
But if she turned in 30s and she was still writing this stuff, Adele to me is a really good example of an artist that's grown in
Yeah.
that her first album, 21, I think it was, or maybe it was 19, has songs that when you listen to them in the right frame of mind can sound a little teen angsty. By the time she's writing the latest album, that's all gone, and it definitely is a woman, a young woman, making her way through relationships and stuff. I mean, I don't have a problem with the lyrical content of almost any song because that's their expression, and if I'm going to be critical of that, I'm just being an asshole in a way, in that I don't want to, subjugate or deprive them of their ability to express themselves. If you don't like it, just don't listen to it.
Yeah, but you don't have to stand there and go, oh, that's great.
Right. On the other, exactly.
You're sure you can express it, but if it's shit, it's shit.
Yeah, it is.
And if it's never mind. Especially I object to anything agenda driven, and because then I feel like you're tricking me into something. You're trying to brainwash me. You're giving me your moral agenda.
Right.
Should I adhere to your morals because you're a musician, because you're famous?
Right.
Who are you to
Yeah, I know. I'm with you.
propagandize on me?
Right.
So yeah,
totally.
I kind of get upset about these sort of things because I think it's hijacking of the arts.
Yeah, you're always going to have that though, because people abuse anything. So art is not going to be an exception to that.
Yeah, and therefore we as the artists have to be vigilant and call them out.
Is that our job?
Yes, because it's any crowd's job to be self-critical, because it's easy to be critical of others.
Yeah.
And for us as musicians, it's the world of musicians is our world, and it's like it's part of your house, and your house is your responsibility.
Right.
So,
I don't know. You think that there's been, I hate to ask you the questions,
Yeah.
but do you think there's been a change in the way that musicians are perceived in the last 50 years? I guess that'd be hard for you to answer since you haven't been alive for 50 years.
yes, definitely. Musicians, there are certain clear periods. This is not my observation. I learned this from others as well.
Right,
But
you'd have to.
for example, the 80s really is the era where people are those like rarefied rock stars, those aliens that touch down on Earth just to
Right.
and everybody's happy to be in their mere presence for a moment, and you can really see that on early MTV. That
Sure.
whole mentality about what an artist is supposed to be.
Royalty.
Yeah,
Royalty.
royalty,
Really.
and that's totally gone now.
Right.
That was kind of destroyed by the late 2000s. In the 2000s, you had a sort of throwback to the old school rock star that partied and was uncatchable.
Right.
But then social media totally destroyed that, and now
Okay, and I was trying to figure out like how that got destroyed, and you think it's social media. Yeah, I think you're sort of right in that it definitely demystified.
it demystified,
Some.
and what it did,
But
it
then
also cut up the audience. So there's not no longer, there's one Keith Richard to the whole pop music world.
Right.
There's only one, and there will never be a second Rolling Stones, because that's the only band that survived. That was one of the original bands in the West that created pop music and rock and roll.
Sure.
And he's the longest standing part of the longest standing band.
Sure.
And they did everything in every era.
That's true.
And there's no undoing that. And
Right.
now I think the audience is much more split up. So and you see that in award shows, they get more and more categories as we speak.
That's true.
And there's a king of every small group.
Right.
And
When this transition was happening, though, in the and I agree with you in the 1990s, what came out of that was, I think, the acceptance. I want to say it was kind of codified in the musical legend, mythology, of a more independent view of things. Like, you went from sort of having these mega groups with these, sort of huge hits and stuff, and you're right, sort of the rock star royalty mentality, to like the exact opposite. Like by the mid 2000s, people like the Dixie Chicks and Adele, people that you could touch, people, Susan Boyle, for God's sakes. I'm trying to think of sort of comet. I don't know if you know Ani DeFranco, a couple of different. But this whole singer-songwriter thing became much more acceptable.
Oh yeah, that was the era of singer-songwriter.
Right. As a reaction to the big rock star, because the big rock star wasn't possible anymore, because record labels just weren't putting millions of dollars into promoting one or two, bands. For me, it's interesting how it's over the course of the last 100 years, I've seen musicians change from being completely dismissed at the beginning of the century to respected once recordings and radio came out in the 20s and 30s. All of a sudden, people got famous and people got paid.
Yeah.
And that continued on, including black people in the 40s and 50s in the form of jazz, and then including lower-end white people in country recordings and rockabilly and stuff like that. Yeah. In the 60s, all of a sudden, people who were not particularly, were not classically educated musicians and stuff, were really getting famous. Then the British invasion and all this stuff. So it's kind of gone up and down, because then singer-songwriters kind of came in as a reaction to that in the 60s, and then they went away in the 70s with disco and punk and all kinds of crazy stuff. But throughout the whole situation, the credibility of musicians has never been lower than I think it is now. Like up until now, musicians were still respected because they had learned their craft. They were popular, and by being popular, that meant something. Not all these people would like this if it was not of quality. But now, a lot of people can like stuff and it's crap because of the way that the internet and the electronics are parceled out. Our music, honestly, God, I'm going to get in trouble for this next sentence, so we'll see if anybody pulls it out. I would say the music industry is run by 16-year-old girls. That's who's listening to Spotify for 13 hours a day.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The rest of us don't have that kind of time.
That's true.
It's run by 16-year-old girls, and I shit you not, it's terrible. I mean, if you're an adult, I'm 50, years old, 50-ish years old. I don't have anything in common with what a 16-year-old is listening to, unless I go out of my way to it, which is kind of why I know Billie Eilish, but I'm not associating with Billie Eilish. I don't feel what she feels. I just know her from, she's making a dent in the industry.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed, and it's
I
really
know what you're talking about. The Taylor Swifts are just, of the world are driving me crazy because it's a 16-year-old girl. I mean, I realize she's not, but that's that's your audience.
She's my age. She's early 30s.
Yeah, but she's still writing like she's a 16-year-old girl
Yes.
because she's still going after that demographic.
She is.
She's
yeah.
not going to be able to graduate out of that. You're never going to find serious music from Britney Spears. I'm sorry, but if you start out like that,
That's interesting. Is there anyone who did? Madonna?
maybe Madonna got somewhat relevant. Although I'm sure after the William Orbit stuff was pretty cool that she did later in her career. I think by now it might be wearing a little thin. But there were probably, Jody Mitchell never was not respected. So, Adele was never not respected. So
Yeah.
on that level,
Yeah,
Adele did start young and she's grown and we want to see that.
She was really good. She got
Fergie.
respected for being really good, I think, Adele, when she came out.
Exactly.
Everybody was like, this girl is good.
Yeah, there's nothing about her that's not super professional, but except her personality. If you see her when she's not singing, she is a really strange goofball.
Yeah, but that's because of these 5 that you wrote down. And we never got to list them all 5. So
Yeah, let's talk about it.
I'll read them all 5 before we give any
Sure.
comments, so the listeners will know which 5 we are talking about. So
Sure.
the mind takes stimuli differently. You mentioned 5 things. 1, impulsiveness.
Right.
2, high intelligence. 3, what did I write down? The connoisseurship.
Yeah, conservative. Yeah, that's a really odd term. We'll talk about that.
4, alienation. 5, depression. And 6, addiction.
Right,
So we talked about addiction. We talked about alienation.
right. Which leads to depression, of course.
Which leads to depression.
Yeah, all these things are connected,
So,
obviously.
Yeah. And the connoisseurship, that's the odd one out.
Yeah, and I have to say that's some of my independent research. So I came up with that idea myself, but I found it supported. Connoisseurship is basically not only do you understand your art, but you see things in other art and music and stuff like that other people don't see. And the way you can tell whether this is an issue for you is if you're constantly talking with your friends about some aspect of a piece of music or art, and they're sort of staring blankly and going, yeah, I get you, but they don't. That's connoisseurship. That means that you have your sensitivity is to the under the subtlety, the underscore, the hidden meaning, the metaphors and stuff involved, much more so. And you can prove this, and I try to do this in my lecture, by how many rock stars have these amazing collections of paintings or sculptures or this kind of stuff. It's not uncommon for musicians to collect something. Think of all your musician friends. I'll bet you one or more of them, if they don't have another artistic hobby like painting or something, they might collect something, whether it's antique or buttons or photographs or something. And that has to do with organizing art and organizing stuff in their head. But it's something I totally noticed. I mean, that I talked with, I have a list. I talked about 25 people when I was doing the course. I interviewed them, and some of them were studio heads, and some of them are record label people, most of them are musicians. But every one of them had a strong opinion about art, just like you.
Yes.
Your opinion about art, I would put to you, is stronger than most of your friends.
Yes,
You care
sure.
more. That's connoisseurship. You can't not care. It's not
Also
within
true.
you.
Also true.
Right. Do you understand that's rare?
Yeah.
Okay, so
no,
like...
Not
okay.
really. I wasn't
It
too aware.
totally is rare. That is a rare. To ask people. Do people do not walk around thinking about art the way that you do.
Yeah.
Some do, but it is a minority.
Yeah, so stupid way this expresses itself in my life
Yeah.
is I care about the quality of the TV show that I'm watching.
Sure, I listen to music when I'm in elevators.
Yeah.
And I get annoyed if it's bad.
Mm.
And it's always bad. But I'll sit there. I will say something to people. My poor long-suffering Vrow, Shannon. I'll say, "God, listen to that bass on that sound. You think they could have found something better?" And she's looking at me like, "What in an elevator? What are you talking about? It's 5 seconds."
I always think do they get paid for this? And if yes, I should make this because I could probably do this in 5 minutes, and I
Right.
could be rich. I could be rich if I made this this
You
crap.
can make that stuff in 5 minutes too. You're right. I used to do that. I used to. I wrote for a company that did cards. When you open up the cards, it play a little song.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually wrote that music. Somebody has to do it. You know, little card song, and yeah, you get paid for that too. But that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you and it's not a coincidence that you're a musician. Also have connoisseurship. It's just rare. It's just rare. IT guys, go ask them what their favorite bands and stuff, and they'll tell you,
Yeah,
but they're
but-
not passionate about it.
Yeah, I noticed this at parties. When I try to make small talk
Oh,
about
my.
music, and you go, "Oh, what sort of music do you like?" And they're like,
Oh, that's so
"Yeah,
funny.
I don't really care what sort of music
Yeah,
it is."
isn't that and doesn't that make you feel alienated? You see how all these things go together.
I start pushing. I'm sort of aggressively poking your ribs, so to speak, and go, "Oh, do you like this one?" "Yes, I like this one. Do you like this one?" I pick something opposite. "No, I don't like this." So you don't like all music. You like certain music.
Right.
You just haven't put into words which is the music that you like, but they don't care that
But it
much about
truly
finding out.
doesn't matter to a lot of these people. That's the thing is you can't imagine it not mattering.
Yeah.
But there are tons of
can't.
people. Yeah, there's a guy who fixes cars for a living right up the street. It does not care what is on the radio while he's fixing his car. You and I would have to have a double approved playlist. We'd be
Yeah.
up the night before going, okay, about now, at 2 o'clock, I'll be getting sleepy. I got to do some high energy rock there. I mean, we'd be all into it.
Yeah.
They do not care.
No.
And that is the majority of people.
I can't work in a workplace where they have the radio on.
Isn't that crazy?
I cannot do it. And
Right.
I work a side job
Sure.
in a coffee place, and they have a playlist that's standardized.
Right.
And to me, that's the most difficult thing about the job. The most challenging thing
Right.
is
Is tolerating the bad art.
tolerating the bad art. Yes,
Ah, see.
that's the most challenging thing.
Right.
So there's one more
Yeah.
in this list, and that's the high intelligence.
Yeah.
And I was so surprised to read that there was found
Proof.
proof. Yeah, that people are that care more about music tend to be the people that are higher in intelligence than
Right,
average.
right.
So caring more, and then I thought, but it makes perfect sense because music is a high form of abstraction. And basically, what intelligence seemed to mean, although you can define it in different ways, is the ability to think about the world in higher forms of abstraction. So it makes
The
sense.
future and the past, the basic ones, and then from that morality.
Yeah.
These are all abstractions that animals have no clue about.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
so they're completely human. I hear you. I think you're right.
So and that makes perfect sense because I always like to tell people that music does not exist and sound does not exist.
Oh yeah,
From the materialistic point of view, there is no such thing as sound.
it's just sound waves. You're right. Yeah.
There are no sound waves. There are sound waves to you, sir, but they actually are pressure waves. That's
I
what
guess
they-
you're right. You're right. They are.
There is only pressure waves,
Yeah.
and it only becomes sound to an interpretive system of consciousness,
Right.
and it only becomes music to an form of intelligence.
Right, and how smart do you have to be able to be to make a living selling air vibrations?
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially what musicians do.
Yeah.
That they sell expensive air vibrations.
But the same goes for storytelling. So, like
Yeah, but
a story doesn't
perhaps.
exist, but well, not from the materialistic point of view, only from a phenomenological point of view.
A phenomenological point of view.
Yeah,
Good Lord,
that
sir.
word is a bitch.
That's beautiful. I love it.
But for only from that point of view, do stories exist? Does music exist? So
Wow, that's interesting.
it's
You
all
should say-
levels of abstraction, and therefore I'm not so surprised that people that appreciate these abstractions more tends to be the people that have more ability to appreciate abstractions.
Right. Well, we have to put this into context too. So this started out with an article in Scientific American. I think it was in 1992, and essentially they had put together a compendium of all the literature and the studies done to that point about people's what people's IQs were when they were tested in school, and then what did they become? What was their job?
Yeah.
And so the Labor Department of the United States pays for people to do studies about how much people are making and what are the jobs and what do we need more nurses? Should we be doing more of that, or do we need more architects? Maybe we are coming to help sort of balance that stuff out. Not coincidentally, when musicians sort of showed up, then we just saw more capability. It wasn't a lot; it was 7 to 10%. But we just see consistently higher scores on standardized personality tests like the Stanford Binet or Minnesota Multi-Phase Personality Inventory or any of these sort of standardized tests. We just see a little bump in intelligence. And it was never the case that someone was a musician and was less than average intelligence. You don't see a lot of people who are stupid that are professional musicians. It just doesn't happen.
It's so fascinating.
It's not possible. And nobody talks about that because those people do take in music to great effect.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know about Awakenings, the whole situation that happened in the 70s, they started playing music for older people who hadn't spoken, who were in deep states of dementia, had been non-active, nonverbal for years. And all of a sudden they played music from some era that means something to them, and they are completely animated. They're dancing. Some of them spoke for the first time in years. They're gesturing. It awakens a part of their brain.
Yeah, it's a different part of your brain.
It's a different part of your brain. So I'm not saying that that you can only be a musician if you're smart.
No.
I am saying that most musicians are smart. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
It's not required, but most musicians are smart. That makes life a little more difficult for musicians. I wrote in my thing that Hemingway said, what was it? I've never met a creative person that was happy.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Something like creativity. Yeah, I remember the quote. It's not exactly that.
It's not exactly that. Yeah, and that's true. Because by virtue of being smart, you understand the challenges that humanity faces, and they affect you. If you're a moral person, they affect your morality, and you're morally outraged. If you're a financial person, you look at it from that context. If you're a business person, from that side, and indeed as an artist, you're looking at it from that point of view. But yeah, it's being smart is not always the happiest person in the room.
That's a good one. Smartest person is not the happiest person in the room.
Yeah.
There's no correlation. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is also really an insight in how my brain works, because I'm going to come back to the previous subject
Sure.
to summarize, to close this off.
Yeah, now I'm coming towards the end of my window as well.
Good. So we talked about the artist changing from the role of the musician changing and the position of the musician changing from the 20s to the 2020s.
Yeah.
And also on our way to here in the car, we talked about all music being the same that's on the radio.
Right.
And when we were talking about it and walking through the music history, I realized the 70s was sort of the epic moment of musical diversity and musical complexity.
Probably.
And from then on, from the 80s, it became a more polished product.
Yeah.
And that's something that's still continuing today. And I think it totally ruined mainstream music because it took over. And that's sort of the moment music started to die. And I had prepared a question about that, and because I know you're very opinionated on this subject.
Okay.
And I was wondering, because when the 80s happened, what happened was drum computers
Right.
and synthesizers. And that's when the possibility for making a polished product started to appear.
Right.
So I'm wondering about music technology and real music. Did music technology kill music? Does music technology have the promise of reviving music?
Right.
Or is playing music dead and has something else replaced it?
Wow, those are all big questions, So I think I'll start with an anecdote and then sort of move from there. I have a friend here in Utrecht who is an architect, And architects were not using computer-aided design until the last 20 years. But all of a sudden, you could go from an idea to a visualization, pretty much a photograph of what the building would look like without spending a dime.
Yeah.
You know, they used to make models, actual physical models. You know, you've probably seen them in old movies. The architects, when they were making, that wasn't required after computers. So computers gave them a tool, but you wouldn't say that architecture has been compromised. The quality of architecture in the world hasn't been compromised because of the use of computers, right?
I wouldn't know.
No. Okay. So in the same way, you can't say that about music either. Even, and because I was going to say it's crap to you, but it is only crap. I won't say only to you, but you have to look at the numbers. So 80s music sounds like 80s music because synthesizers were used. That's why, you know, you can see some of reflections of this in architecture too, and everything else that we graphics. You know, if you look at magazine ads before Photoshop, they're completely different.
Yeah.
You know, so everything was affected by this. But popularity, you know, you care about a particular level of quality, a particular standard, but most people don't. So for most people, the 80s represented a real explosion in musical creativity because all of a sudden things were very small. You could put a CD like this, it would last for an hour or more in your car, and gone were the 8 tracks and cassettes, so you could listen to a long period of time. And then the internet came out and you could listen forever. You could put on, you know, a YouTube of an artist and say play automatically, and it would play music forever. It would stream it forever. The first streaming was way back in the 90s with YouTube, you know, which I guess 2000 when it was, because it was not in the 90s. But so I have to hedge my bet there a little bit. The question was, who is running the show? Are the computers running the show, or, you know, have we lost control in a weird way? Yes, we have. This is an opinion only, because commercial music is in a box. It's in a box that caters to the people who are not us, who don't care as much as we do. Who don't care. They're not. Their musicians are not what record labels are catering to. 16-year-old girls is what record labels are catering to. So the thing that we have also made available by this technology is choice. Back in the 70s, what you could buy with music was whatever a freaking record label put in front of you. That was it. You might be able to record your own stuff on a cassette, but that's it. You weren't making your own. Nobody could afford to make their own records and stuff like that. So somebody else had choice. Now, you can make a song, a good song, put it on YouTube, and a friend of yours in China can see it later today. That's crazy. That's crazy choice. So he doesn't have to buy something. He can get it all free off the internet. So taking the value out of music has taken the guts out of it in some ways. You know, it's made it so more people can be more creative, but less people can be economically successful. So, and I think this is the trend. The trend will be further and further small groups of music, the further smaller subgenres and stuff. And I think you're going to see radio stations continuing to sort of play to the common denominator with occasional exceptions. And then those exceptions will become famous and interesting and stuff. Because there are college radio stations that play diverse stuff, and there are pirate radio stations that play perverse stuff. But for the most part, broadcast is not where you're going to hear the best music. You know, you're going to have to dig it out. So people who care will dig it out, and people who don't will listen to the radio. So if that answers your question, it kind of depends on who's asking the question. If it's the general public, things are great.
Yeah.
If you're a musician, things are weird. Because you know what I'm saying? Because even no matter how good your stuff is, without the support of the record industry, you will not be successful. There's a mythology that you can do it yourself.
Yeah.
And you can go on the internet and you can find these success stories. But these success stories are really rare. If you count the number of success stories, there's 4 or 5 of them, and they keep getting repeated on all these websites. But
Yeah.
statistically, and this is absolutely true, and these are pretty recent, real statistics that you can get at the website. 98% of all music revenue is through traditional means. It's through record labels. It's through people, who go out and seek out particular artists. It's not any other way. It's not do it yourself. You're not going to get on the charts if you don't have a record label behind you. You're not going to get on the charts if you have no money behind you. It does not matter how good your stuff is, because quality is not the end. Communication is the end. It has to be the most relatable stuff. I know it sucks, but this is why, But you can make a living. I say you can make a living. You can make music that is crazy and that really says what you want it to say, but the chances of you being able to make a living at it are really reduced now. You would have never been able to do it either, though. People say, "Oh no, it's ruined." But in the '70s, you would have sent your demo, and the record company would have gone, "Oh my God, this is too political. We can't do this," or "This is too much of a niche market." They're looking for the widest possible thing. Innovative record labels definitely put out some stuff that shifted it one way or the other, and we're really grateful for those record labels. So the ones that came up with punk stuff in the late '70s, thank God for them. Or the people who came up with the new age stuff in the '80s. You might not like it, but at least it pushed the art one way or the other.
Yeah.
These were innovative labels that most of them are not around anymore. That's fine, but in the main record industry, it's in a box. I see your frustration. So let me ask you: how does this affect you as a musician? How did this knowledge?
I'm wondering what to do.
Yeah.
So what are the options? What do I have? Well, I can make the music that I want to make, and regardless of anything, and get some other income.
Right.
But to be honest, there is not really anything outside of the creative arts that I could pursue as a career, and I don't want to get stuck in a side job for the rest of my life.
Right.
So I don't really know what to do. I could make commercial music, but that would destroy my soul, so that's not really going to happen.
Okay.
So I could either accept to be poor,
Right.
or
which has been the lot of most musicians and artists in the world.
That's my life so far. I just accepted to have no money.
Right.
And for now, I've always accepted to have a side job.
Right.
From now and then, when necessary.
Mm-hmm.
But what that doesn't fulfill is there is still this question mark of career. What will you do for a career? So I'm diversifying what I'm doing creatively.
That is wow! I had my answer all set, and you came up with it. Diversify how you are as an artist. If you're an artist and you're a musician, you have something to say. You think, and so you can do that, and then use everything else that's now being included. I don't want to be so obscure. I'll get more clear. You can use visuals now when 40 years ago, musicians were not thinking about visuals at all. So you can do that to make, whether it's still visuals or motion visuals, you can decide to align them with your music, or you can have them as the album cover. But you can use them as a way to further your communication. Will this make you a successful artist? I would put to you that in 20 years, there won't be any huge successful artists. There'll be lots and lots of middle successful artists. Because there'll be enough.
That's good enough for me, by the way. I don't need to be hugely successful.
Well, so if you want the key to success for that, then I have it.
Okay.
This is just experience and managing different bands and stuff like that. The key for an artist to make a living as an artist is to be an artist all the time. And that means you must perform live. You have to. And when you do perform live, you really have to give something of yourself. You have to give something of yourself that's vulnerable, that can be criticized, that is a bit unusual. You will earn the respect of people, and that small group of people that comes to see you at every gig, eventually those gigs will get a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and then some people will want recordings of this, and it builds in a very organic way from the people who love you and that you love. You have to do it with love. I would put to you that music is love. And the reason I would say that is because if you don't communicate with somebody, you don't care, which is the opposite of love. So if the opposite of love is not caring, then caring is love, and communicating is love as well. And music is the only reason that music exists on the planet. The only reason is to communicate. That is what it does. That is its particular and only job, whether it's in the animal kingdom or it's people. Bird songs, they're there to get fucked. You know, lions are there to roar. When they roar, that's music, and they're warning you. Music is communication. So you, as an artist, have to connect on a person-to-person basis with your fans. This idea of huge crowds following you around is not going to work anymore. But if you've got 50 people who will pay anything to see you, that will support any endeavor that you do, you might can make a living. It's just kind of that simple. There's a band called Jody Moon, and I hope they won't be angry. I'll use them as an example. They're from Maastricht, I want to say.
Okay.
It's a male as female. She is a fantastic vocalist, very unusual. He's an extremely good producer. They've got maybe 8 records out. They've been doing this for 10, 15 years. They've been on television. They've been on the charts a little, but they can't get anywhere with it. And the reason they can't get anywhere with it is the music that they're playing is kind of cafe music, for lack of better terms, kind of low, sort of singer-songwriter, sort of low-energy stuff that doesn't lyrically take any chances. They don't open themselves up to anything. You know, it's all sort of little stories that don't mean a lot and stuff like that. And when they hired me to tell them, you know, why isn't this working? And when I told them this, you know, the reaction was mixed because I think that they knew it was true. And that's the sad thing is that you have to put yourself out there and be prepared for the hit because that's what people respect. You know, they respect that you will go, you know, that you are confident about what you're doing enough to make and stick by, you know, whatever you're doing. It's hard. I mean, it doesn't guarantee success, but I can guarantee that you will not be successful if you don't do this for the long term.
Thank you.
Does it make sense?
Perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Resonates totally.
And I can prove to you, by the way, that the record industry knows this.
How?
The Eurovision Song Contest.
Yeah.
What you see there is not bands, but individual singers who go out there and they pick songs or create songs that are emotionally vulnerable. Most of these performances, you know, are made to have they're not there to rock out and dance to. They're there to get you to cry, to smile, to remember something. You know, if you watch the Eurovision stuff,
I will watch it this year.
Yeah, well, you should because it'll be in Rotterdam in May. I mean,
Really?
Yeah, it's hosted here in the Netherlands, and that's why it's a big deal. But all these people are putting themselves out there, and the whole show is about putting yourself out there. They always have a part where, you know, Billy, we'll use a different example. You know, Johnny isn't just a musician; he's also a survivor. In 1965, his father was killed along with 15 other people, and you know he was an orphan. You know, they give you this life story on this stuff. But part of that is trying to, a record label knows what I know, is that you now have to connect with people individually, is trying to make that happen. So they have to give you this backstory to make the fiction, if it is, you know, to make the story something that people can relate to and identify with. Because people are now super fans. Have you heard this term?
Yeah, I heard for it.
Yeah,
I'm a super fan.
And the super fan is a fan that will buy your vinyl, even though they don't have a record player.
Yeah.
Who will buy tickets to concerts that are not even that they're not even going to for friends and stuff because they're in a different area. Who will, you know, email you questions about lyrics and stuff. You know, who are really into you as an artist because they're not an artist.
Yeah.
You're their spokesperson. You're the guy. Way back in the beginning of this podcast, we said, you know, somebody's got to go out there and take the hit to say all the shit that needs to be said.
Yeah.
It's still true. It's the same thing.
Yeah, go do it.
But people aren't doing it. You think Ronnie Flex is not a political, you know, Mon is not a political person. The music coming out of these people is just fine, but it's not going to be around in a year.
No.
Nobody cares.
It's the people that are... They are artists because they can't fit in.
Right. Tom Waite was a great example that you gave.
Yeah.
Tom Waite can't sing worth shit. He can't, not at all. But at the same time, it doesn't matter if you're into what he's doing and what he's saying.
Yeah.
You know, Randy Newman is one of my favorites. He also can't sing,
Mm.
but I love the content of the songs, the sarcasm and stuff like that. Enough, you know. And I think that you, as an artist who does instrumental stuff, you have a even bigger challenge because you kind of have the choice between either being like super amazing musically, so that at least musicians get into you. Oh my God, did you hear how he was able to
I'm
play
not
that?
doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not playing for musicians.
Or go to where everybody else is. You have to instrumentally move people.
Yes, that's what you were saying. The thing what I was thinking now that everybody can put their music on the internet. The thing
Right.
you have to do is make something that matters to other people.
Right. That's exactly it.
And that's the people are the gatekeepers thing.
Yeah, it
You have to
is.
make something that matters something to the other people. And why does something matter to the other people? It has to communicate something, and
Right.
it has to be true.
Right.
It has to be vulnerable, because if you're not vulnerable, you communicating niceties.
Yeah.
Niceties don't matter.
Right.
Yeah, they matter, but not in that way.
Yeah.
What matters is if you truly be able to, I don't know, be able to communicate something of your soul, put that into your music, and then
Precisely,
people can feel that out.
Yeah. So in our last minute, let me ask you: do you have a favorite author, someone that you read,
I don't read that much because I'm.
or maybe filmmaker? I can expand it to that because your generation is also filmmakers.
I do not watch films that much. I like Jim Jarmusch.
Sure. Okay. So most people though have an author or somebody
Yeah.
that and you know when they come out with a new book, then they go and buy it because they love that author.
Yeah.
You know. So for me, it was Clive Cussler. Some people it's Bill Bryson. Sometimes it's these people make murder mysteries. Stephen King is very you know whenever he puts out something.
I like William Gibson.
William Gibson, yeah, fine example there. And if they came and they were doing a lecture at Utrecht, if William Gibson was doing it, you would go.
I'd be there.
And you would, and if it was
Bruce
20,
Sterling, same story.
and if it was you, if you had to pay €20, you'd go to it, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if he was selling a book that was not available anywhere else for
I'd
€20,
get it.
you'd buy it. That's because you have a personal relationship with that artist. Exactly. I mean, precisely exactly the same thing that I need from you as a musical artist. Because I will then also go to your concerts. I will go and support you in every way possible. I'll buy your vinyl without a record player.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, you know? So
Yeah, it's the same.
I have my little friend in the pocket.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about all this crazy stuff.
Yeah. I love this. Well, as a closing remark, I wanted to tell you that I probably grew up on your music because I watched Discovery Channel a lot as a kid.
Yeah, it's possible.
Teenager. So I must have heard
If you
so
watch,
many...
did you watch
so-
Walking with Dinosaurs? This is the one where they did the animation, the
Yes.
Dynamos. I just a fair amount of that kind of stuff, you know, or Top Gear, or these
I
crazy.
watched a lot of Top Gear.
Yeah, yeah, all that stuff is in the library. They keep using it over and over again.
Yeah, so I must have heard so many,
I'm pretty sure you have.
minutes of your music growing up.
It's true. Well, you know, it did what it was supposed to do, but I was not a courageous composer. So I have respect for you. If you know, I was never trying to be known. I was never trying to express anything. I was trying to help somebody else express something. So I would look at a picture and I would go,
I
okay.
can't help to take the route that I take. Some friend once told me, I have so much respect for how fearless you're facing the insecurity that and still taking this route.
Yeah.
It's like you don't have. There's zero bravery involved.
Yeah.
I have no option. This is
But it seems
how
really
I'm
brave.
wired.
Even now, it seems brave.
It is stupid. It's profoundly stupid, but I do it anyway. Thank you so much for your time.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.
I had a great time doing this podcast.
Me too. Good luck.